well from me, as we wait for a summer, potentially July Nintendo Direct. With the rumored Animal Crossing, a number of big Nintendo Switch 2 news and leak stories have surfaced, both from Nintendo and some usual suspects. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell. We can't start with anything else but the big game of July, namely Donkey Kong Bananza, which has been confirmed by Nintendo to have been fully developed by the 3D Mario AAA team. That is right, Nintendo EPD Production Group number 8 at Nintendo Tokyo in Kanto, featuring the same producers, so Yoshiaki Koizumi and Koichi Hayashida, and director Kenta Motokura. The previews of Bananza have been glowing, with DK being compared as the perfect middle ground between 3D Mario and the past Banjo-Kazooie games, which is quite fitting as the previous 3D Donkey Kong game was Donkey Kong 64, developed by Rareware, who also developed Banjo-Kazooie. There have been a few complaints here or there about performance, but the build that was played during the preview was not the final build of the game itself, so it's possible that Nintendo has been able to iron out some of the few quirks that this game might have from the technical aspect. But multiple outlets have been pointing out that this game is the first true game developed for Nintendo Switch 2 and nothing else in mind. The reason is that unlike Mario Kart World and Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which first started development for Nintendo Switch and then were moved over to Nintendo Switch 2 to become exclusives there, DK was always intended for Nintendo Switch 2. But it does bring up a question in mind. Based on the level of ambition, based on the team that is developing it, and the marketing provided for DK, as we also saw with the newest commercial, does it mean that the next 3D Mario game is several years away, say 2027, or maybe even beyond? Are they hiding something for the Super Mario 40th anniversary, starting this September? Nathan Haight finally replied to the matter, but not with the answer which some may have hoped for. Quote of the exchange: Luigi Francesco Latteri. Yo, at Nathan Haight 2. Are we close to a new 3D Mario game, or are we still far away because of DK's game? To which Nathan Haight responded, on July 1st, define close. There was no further answer. In other words, he might know something, but we don't know much more. At least he made it clear that he doesn't know of any Nintendo Direct in the first week of July, which also makes sense. Since this video was uploaded on Wednesday, nothing happened. He was right. We will see later on this month. But a new 3D Mario before 2027 would definitely further solidify the dominance of the Nintendo Switch 2, as it in 25 days has sold a very impressive number after the massive launch. And the following numbers were leaked accidentally by Nintendo themselves and picked up by Nintendo Soup and then Stealth on Twitter. Stealth later updated that it might be a projection, so keep that in mind. 5 million sold, a new record again. What is more interesting though is that we have actual numbers for the different regions worldwide, and they are as follows. Americas 1.8 million units, most of all. Japan 1.47 million units. Europe 1.18 million units, and other regions 550,000 units. Yeah, the best way of pointing this out is that the system has been selling out in a lot of different regions, locations and so on. What I would like to look at more closely here are the numbers for Japan, as Japan has around 1/3 of the population of the US, and it shows that the strategy of selling a Japan exclusive or Japanese language exclusive Nintendo Switch 2 was genius from Nintendo. $100 cheaper than the US one has resulted in sales that are very close to those of the Americas, and it just shows what kind of dominance that the Nintendo Switch 2 will have in the home market of Nintendo. I don't think we need to comment anything beyond this, apart from that Europe has very impressive numbers as well, especially seeing that the system is much more expensive over in my continent, and with some markets pricing the system much higher, close to double the amount of what was the case for the Nintendo Switch 1 back in 2017. And DK Bananza will definitely further boost sales from now in July deep into the holiday season. So yeah, these numbers are mind-blowing, and I think 10 million could be reached even before we enter the holiday season. But onto anything else, we have the very impressive free backwards compatibility upgrades that we already have seen for Super Mario Odyssey and for Zelda, and both were recently tested out by Digital Foundry. Specifically, in the case of Zelda, Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom, which run much more smoothly at higher resolutions, 1620p docked and at 60 frames per second, while undocked it reaches easily the top 1080p at 60 FPS. Meanwhile, Splatoon 3 runs at 5 to 6 times higher resolution, and in some cases, it runs in pretty much steady upscaled 4K. The full list tested by Digital Foundry is as follows, as listed on Reddit. Super Mario Odyssey, mostly 1800p, up from Switch 1, 720p to 900p ranging resolution. Super Mario 3D World is at 1800p, which also was fluctuating between 720p and 1080p. Bowser's Fury is now fluctuating between 1656p to 1800p, which is up from 720p on the Switch 1. And when it comes to the Zeldas, which we already mentioned, 1620p, which is up from the ranging 720p to 900p, and the same case is for Echoes of Wisdom. Splatoon 3 is mostly upscaled 4K, which is up from 720p to 1080p. We additionally have Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, 1440p, up from Switch 1 1080p, so not the biggest jump there, while New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe with Bichette is now an upscaled 4K, up from 1080p, that was the case on Switch 1. Speaking of Switch 2 editions, there are leaks and rumors regarding more of them coming to Nintendo Switch 2 of Nintendo Switch games. And this is following the tease from Beat 'em Ups, as Nash Riedel is now also teasing. I'm just going to say that Mario's 40th anniversary could be celebrated with a number of Switch 2 edition upgrades, as we have both Super Mario Maker 2, multiple Paper Marios, and of course 2023's Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Personally, I would also like Monolith Soft to at least bring one or multiple of the Xenoblade games that, well, which we got all of on the Nintendo Switch to get major Switch 2 edition upgrades. Though we have to be aware that Monolith Soft is probably deep in developing the next game, and since they have not been able to provide or reveal anything so far, that is probably what has priority. But alongside it, we hope that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate can get a 4K upgrade. Of course, it's backwards compatible, which was also highlighted by Masahiro Sakurai, more on him soon. And we also need, of course, an upgrade to 60 FPS for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity so that it can match Age of Imprisonment later this year, as such an update would be a great way to warm up the said game. We also shouldn't forget that Breath of the Wild runs at 60 frames per second in its Switch 2 edition. You know, the one that is free through Switch Online expansion pack. Speaking of that one, the GameCube part of this one is finally delivering a good Mario Strikers game to Nintendo Switch 2. Super Mario Strikers, which might be playable by the time you watch this video, as it drops July 3rd. We're still waiting for a number of release dates though. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment come to mind. The same is the case with Masahiro Sakurai's Kirby Air Riders, announced for 2025, and recently a rumor surfaced that Sakurai demanded to develop this Kirby game for the next Super Smash Bros. Game for Nintendo Switch 2. If it's true, I can definitely understand it. The man has not been developing anything else but Super Smash Bros. Ultimate since 2012's Kid Icarus Uprising. The Smash legend deserves to work again on the character he created back in 1990. But now, back to Zelda. After Volume 1 and 2, we now have Volume 3 out of 6 of Nintendo Japan's Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 Edition series. This time it's focusing on northeastern regions of Hyrule and the changes from Breath of the Wild and Eldin and Akawa. What matters for us though should be this week's auto-built QR code. But shockingly, nothing. The Zelda Notes promise provided in Volume 1 and 2 has not been continued in Volume 3. Hopefully, Volume 4 covering the Gerudo region will restore this tradition with another scandal. But now, let's move closer to home, well, my home, since my own native Norway's Pro Shop seems to have leaked that Elden Ring Tarnished Edition might be a proper Switch cartridge release, not a game keycard release. In other words, just like in the case of my mom's native, Poland's Cyberpunk 2077 from CD Projekt Red. They attached an updated box art with Shadow of the Erdtree found on the website suggests this, and the 16-year rating. But also, the same website shows a less positive price, $9.99 Norwegian crowns, which is $90 sadly. Yep, same as Mario Kart World. But we might get more information through the Bandai Namco Summer Game Showcase. Finally, we have a Nintendo Switch 2 release date for WWE 2K25, that being Wednesday, July 23rd. A game which Dan, who was with me at the London Switch 2 event, is really excited for. Another game where you can smash opponents and items right after DK Bananza. Jokes aside, that is what we have for this time. And hopefully we'll not have to wait much longer for the long anticipated Summer Nintendo Direct. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press that notification bell. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching until the end, and to all our patreon.com/comearound patrons. Special shoutouts go to Raw Producer, JC Funk, and Heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintaro. You all rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.